Hey there, guys. Alright, today we are back. Some more of the Great War. This time we're on to week 9. The Russian war machine and the race to the sea. Only 8 minutes long to discuss the race to the sea, so this should be interesting. But I have faith in this channel. They always do a great job at explaining things very succinctly. It's honestly extremely impressive. I don't know how they do it. I wouldn't be able to do it. I'm not good at explaining things concisely. Anyways, let's go ahead and just dive right into the video.
September 25th, 1914. The mobile war of short, intense battles was over, and the filthy war in the trenches had begun. And this week, we see the trenches grow like lightning on the Western Front in the race to the sea. We also see something even more sinister, as the war of the modern great machines like mega artillery and motorized vehicles spreads to the skies and beneath the seas. I'm Indy Neidell. Welcome to the Great War. At the beginning of the week, the Battle of the Aisne was raging, and British, French, and German alike were digging in. In the east, the Austro-Hungarian army was retreating back within its own borders, pursued by the Russians. The Russians had suffered some great losses against the Germans, but they had also had a string of victories over the Austrians. By this time,
the Austrians are just incompetent as fuck. Holy shit.
The Austro-Hungarian army was recognized by both sides as the weakest of the conflict, and it was becoming fairly obvious that it would require constant German assistance just to survive. And the Russians were thus committed to serious and continuous efforts to finish it off so they could focus on Germany. General Nikolai Ivanov.
That's a fucking beard. Goddamn. That is a Russian man right there.
Of the Imperial Russian Army put what pressure he could on the retreating Austrians to the south, and after beating them in the Battle of Galicia, planned to take the city fortress of Przemysl, then Krakow, and then on to Budapest. This put the fear into the Germans, and they sent 4 army corps from the Western Front to the east, just north of Krakow, which proved to be an immediate threat to the Russian flank. This was very much a tribute to the German railway system, and highlights again the German High Command's comments just before the war that by 1917, the Russian railway system would be a match for the German one, and Germany would not then be able to win a war with Russia, so war must happen in 1914. Ivanov diverted 30 entire divisions to tackle this threat, and they began to march north, leaving only 30 divisions in Galicia to deal with the Austrians. But there were a further 25 divisions up in East Prussia, so it began to look like Ivanov had a real war machine to take on the Germans. Of course, the Russians were also eager to get back at the Germans for the disastrous losses at Tannenberg and Masurian Lakes a few weeks ago. So on the Eastern Front, you now had a lot of people in motion covering huge expanses of territory.
That's a lot of people.
It was completely the opposite in the West. At the Aisne River, it was a stalemate, with the two sides dug into trenches separated by only a few hundred meters, neither side able to gain the upper hand or willing to retreat. The British and French were suffering an average of 2,000 casualties each and every day of the ongoing battle.
Oh, I couldn't even. Oh, that is such an.
Which would last for several more weeks, and the Germans were taking heavy losses as well.
2,000 a day.
Everyone now realized that frontal attacks were suicide, so the armies began to try one of the oldest maneuvers in the history of warfare. They began to try to attack each other from the side, the flank, where an opponent's defenses are much weaker, and he would basically be in a straight line. Now, there were 300 kilometers of open ground between the Aisne and the English Channel, open ground that was as yet unravaged by either army. And the new German Chief of Staff Falkenhayn, who very much believed in a hard offensive war, thought he saw an opportunity to envelop the Allied forces in a way that his predecessor, Moltke, was not able to in August. As a bonus, even if he couldn't surround his opponent, if he could take the Channel ports as far as Calais in the west, he would have an excellent strategic advantage. So he began to move. The French and the British armies redeployed to meet this new threat, and they actually did an incredible job of it. So as the autumn rains and cold came on in force, the trench lines grew and grew to the northwest as each army tried to get around the other. The problem now was that neither side was able to attack quickly enough, or especially to bring up artillery quickly enough to seize the day. So further and further they went. This is known
So wait, the Germans abandoned the Ain?
as the race to the sea. The French in the west, much like the Germans in the east, had a major advantage in railways. See, in the war with Prussia in 1870, the weaknesses of the French railway system had been a major factor in her quick defeat, but France had learned her lesson, and over the next 40 years had built one of the densest and most highly developed networks in the entire world. While the German headache now was that the retreating Belgians had sabotaged their tracks and taken away anything that could roll. And even though Germany committed 26,000 men to clearing tunnels and fixing track, it would take several more weeks to really get it up to speed. Weeks that the German army might not have. The beginning of the Industrial War, the beginning of trench warfare, the beginning of the war on other continents. There were still a lot of new beginnings at this point in the war, including a big one, the beginning of the war in the air. September 22nd marked the first British air raid on Germany. They attacked the Zeppelin sheds at Dusseldorf and Cologne and took them completely by surprise. People had realized in August, though, just what sort of advantages airplanes could bring to the war. Often, it was learning by experience, such as when German troops in Nancy watched a plane circle over them for quite a while before dropping what turned out to be a bright light. The men stood around the obviously harmless bomb and wondered what its purpose was until the French suddenly started shelling them now that they knew where they were. Aviation.
A flare. That's fucking...
was still in its dangerous infancy. In 1912, the accidental death rate for pilots was 1 in 50. But the war would change all of that. Now here's some numbers for you. The British went to war with 113 airplanes. The Austrians had 48, and the Belgians 12. The French were actually the European aviation leaders before the war, and were alone among the warring nations in having used planes in military service, which they had in Morocco in 1913. By October 1914, France had ordered 2,300 aircraft and 3,400 engines. They were also the first nation to organize their planes by types: fighters, bombers, and reconnaissance planes. All of the other armies followed suit, and soon the romantic war of the Flying Aces would begin. Another big first happened on September 22nd, when the German sub U-9 sank 3 British cruisers in one day off the Dutch coast. Now, these 3 cruisers were sort of obsolete, and the British government was worried that they might be attacked by modern German cruisers, but no one worried about the threat from a U-boat. That U-boat sank all 3 ships with only 6 torpedoes in under 90 minutes. Since no one had any concept of submarine warfare, when the first cruiser was hit, the other ones stopped to pick up survivors instead of getting the hell out of Dodge. And when the second one was hit, the third one did the same. 1,459 men died. It was the worst British naval disaster of the entire war. The British Admiralty after that decided to mine the North Sea, quote, on a Napoleonic scale, unquote. This event was an instant lesson in how important submarine warfare was to become.
But notice that quote, on a Napoleonic scale. The last time they had seen a war of this scale was over 100 years ago, from one crazy Frenchman.
And it shook the reputation of the supposedly invincible Royal Navy. So at the end of the week, the bloody fighting and continuous shelling in the trenches at the Ain, which heralded the new era of endless, continuous battles, had yet to stop. Both sides were also moving further and further toward the sea, trying to find new ground somewhere, anywhere, between Switzerland and the sea, where they might finally gain a decisive advantage. The Russians were massing in Poland to try to attack both the mobile Germans and the Austrians in their fortress. But what would be the biggest news of the week in the long run was that the war of the great machines was taken to new levels with the war in the sky and the war under the seas. 2 types of warfare that were completely new in the entire history of mankind. They would change the war was fought forever, and over the next century would claim untold millions of lives of soldier and civilian alike. If you'd like to find out more about the...
All right, that was a pretty short week this time around. The Russian war machine and the race to the sea. Yeah, I guess they don't really have much to talk about for probably a good bit No intense battles probably for maybe another week or two, I think, I'd say. Be even longer, I'm not sure. I'm a little rusty on my timeline of World War One battles. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.